All right. Welcome to the next unit. Okay, we finished World War I. We're moving into, and that goes from 1914 to 1918. We're moving into the Roaring Twenties, and that'll spill into the Great Depression in the 1930s. And then we will move on after that into World War II. So right now, we're kind of in between the wars, and we're in a time period where the United States is really trying to figure out who are Americans really, what is our national identity, what is our culture. A lot of different groups are going to bring things to the table that are going to kind of have a huge impact on what American culture is, what our national identity looks like. All right, we're going to cover 3 standards in this unit. That's a lot. And a lot of vocabulary, both academic and content, but you'll see a lot of these terms in other subject areas as well. So, what we'll do is these are all the standards that we're going to cover this unit, but let's just kind of focus on Standard 16, our national identities. So after World War I ends, we're really, communism and the threat of communism pops up. We're going to look at how life changes under the 18th and 19th Amendments, the impact of mass production, not just on the nation, but on consumers in general and what consumerism looks like in the U.S. We're going to talk about how radio and movies impact us and really change what our national culture looks like. And then the emergence of new forms of music and literature. All right, so let's focus on the first one. Standard 16a. Explain how fears of rising communism and socialism in the U.S. led to the Red Scare and immigrant restriction. So really what we need to know is what's communism? Why are Americans afraid of it? What is it that leads up to our fear of communism? And then how does that impact our decisions both politically, economically, and socially in this country to create the issue of the Red Scare and then force us to restrict immigrants or make us feel like we need to restrict immigration in this country? Again, don't forget while you're going through this, you need to be taking notes. I didn't highlight anything in yellow at this point because I've given you these note-taking sheets with your vocab. Your vocab is still in that pink-purple color, but I stopped highlighting things in yellow because I've given you the same format for notes throughout the entire year. So this shouldn't be anything new. If it's in the PowerPoint, it's probably something you should know. So let's go ahead and dive right into the first thing. All right. Clearly, Miss Stewart can't spell. But communism and fear. In the United States during the time right after World War I, we had seen Russia, we had seen this idea of socialism and turn into an extreme form of socialism to become communism. But Karl Marx, and that should say M-A-R-X, is the father of communism. Okay? And Karl Marx saw that history was a series of revolutions, that those that had been oppressed for so many years, for so long, would eventually overthrow their oppressors. They would take over the means of production in their nation. They would then become the government that would own the means of production. And eventually, they would become the oppressors and the system would become corrupt. Okay? So, with World War I ending, and then the communists seizing Russia, Woodrow Wilson, the President of the United States, at this is going to send troops to go help fight the communists in Russia. And because the Communist Party in Russia had adopted the color red as a symbol for their party, then the whites are going to be those that fight against the communists. So red is kind of associated with communism at this time in this country. And with communism starting to spread this idea of, equality for all, and ensuring the control of the means of production. The United States, Americans feared that there would be a communist revolution here. With the increase in literature being spread around the globe, people had read lots of things. They had seen lots of things happen in other nations, and they were afraid that communism would spread here in the United States. Okay. All right, so let me go back one. I apologize. All right, so Americans looked at capitalism as being very democratic. This was part of our democracy. Capitalism and democracy went hand in hand. And capitalism being, private individuals own the means of production, the land or the natural resources, the labor, the capital, and the entrepreneurship. That was very American. And with the idea of communism, where the government owns all those means of production, they determine what to make, who to make it for, who to sell it to, what the prices are, and how much they're going to make of that product. Americans feel that's kind of the opposite of democracy and exactly what they don't want to see in the United States. So Americans feel they have to take action towards this threat of communism. So this is where the Red Scare comes in. Again, this is one of your vocabulary terms. And the Red Scare is going to unify Americans to fight communism. We're all out to get the communists and the commies and whatnot. And it was something that united Americans, brought them together. And the Red Scare is given this title because, like I told you before, the communists adopted the color red as their color. And what this is going to do is make Americans of immigrants coming in, especially from southern and eastern parts of Europe. So we're going to restrict immigrants coming into this nation. We're going to put a cap on the number that can come in. Okay? So that's going to be the Emergency Quota Act in the 20s, which limits immigrants and how many can come into this country. But then the National Origins Act will restrict the number of immigrants that come into this nation from specific places in Europe. So they're going to put a cap on those Eastern and Southern European nations, more so than those in the North and the West of Europe. Okay? Now, there was a group of terrorists that attacked the U.S. Attorney General during this time. The U.S. Attorney General being A. Mitchell Palmer. And because he was so terrorists attacked, the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI are going to stage these raids to find people who they suspect are anarchists or communists. And they're going to go after people and they're going to arrest them based on what they think those people might be. So it's not necessarily we're arresting people on things they've done. It's what we think they did or what they believe in or what we think they may do. And what you have to understand is that these are called the Palmer raids because, Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer gets this set up, is that they target people's beliefs, not what they actually do. It's going to have no legal standing in the courts because it violates your civil liberties. You can't arrest somebody based on what you think they might do or what they believe. You only arrest somebody when they break the law. All right, and I said we were going to move through this stuff pretty quickly. So at this point, we'll stop, we'll get some questions and practice with the content.